You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
What happens when the safety net that millions rely on doesn't just fray, it freezes? Picture your local farmer's market on a Saturday morning. Families using EBT cards to buy eggs and greens and fresh produce. Now imagine those benefits vanish overnight. It's not just families who suffer. It's the farmer, the teen bagging produce, the grocer down the street. SNAP isn't just about feeding people. It's about economic stability, community health, and the invisible system that keeps our food chain moving. You're listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and I am here to ask, what is SNAP really? Who does it serve? And what happens when it's cut? In this episode, we'll unpack 3 big things: the architecture and evolution of SNAP and why it flexes with the economy, who really receives benefits, and why the myth of the idle recipient falls flat, and how cutting SNAP sets off a domino effect, impacting small farmers, rural stores, and entire communities. And there's a twist you might not expect. We'll explore why asking small farmers to donate more food in a crisis, or even accepting their generosity, might actually make things worse. So, if you're ready to rethink what food assistance really means, not just for the families who need it, but for the systems that feed us all, then stick around for this episode of One Bite is Everything. So, what is SNAP? I'm sure you've heard about it in the news again and again, but let's dive in. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It is the largest federal nutrition assistance program for low-income households in the United States. It helps people buy groceries with EBT cards redeemable at authorized retailers. The federal government pays all the benefits. States administer eligibility, certifying households, and working the distribution systems. The program has roots going back decades. In the late 1930s, early food stamp pilots were used to manage surplus agricultural production and provide food relief during the Depression. Later, pilots in the 1960s led to the permanent adoption via the 1964 Food Stamp Act. By the early 1970s, it was a national program. Further reforms in the 1970s added national eligibility standards, and in 2008, it was officially renamed SNAP. The architecture is important. It's designed to flex with economic cycles. When unemployment rises or wages drop, more households qualify. When times are good, participation falls. That automatic counter-cyclical behavior is part of why SNAP is not just a food aid program, but also plays a stabilizing economic role. In recent years, participation is tens of millions of people each month. For example, in fiscal year 2024, the program served around 41.7 million participants. Total benefit outlays remain large, increased sharply during economic downturns and pandemic periods, then receded somewhat, but remain elevated. Because it is an entitlement, benefits can keep flowing until Congress and the funding law allow otherwise. But also, states must administer it under regulatory requirements for eligibility and benefit calculation. So, let's just take a quick look at who receives these benefits. When we talk about SNAP households, we're talking about very diverse families. It is not a program for a single demographic. Here are some facts. A large share of households receiving SNAP include children, older adults, or people with disabilities. In recent data, about 79% of SNAP households included at least one child, at least one older adult, or a non-elderly person with a disability. These groups account for the majority of participants and share the majority of benefit allocations. Tens of millions of recipients are children. A substantial portion of the participants are under the age of 18. It is also a working families program. Many households on SNAP have earned income. For example, among households with children, more than half had earned income during that year. That means many people using SNAP are working low-wage or part-time or variable hour jobs or are facing wage or hours gaps. Let's talk about race and ethnicity for a second. SNAP participants are from all racial and ethnic groups. The largest racial group by number is non-Hispanic whites, but there are also large shares of Black households, Hispanic households, Asian households, Native American households. And there are many participants who report race unknown or multiple races. So the picture is working families, parents, children, older people, people with disabilities, and households across racial and ethnic lines. It is not a program for the idle or the other. It is a patch for low wages, shifting hours, medical costs, and everyday life pressures. Here's what the critics say, the fair and the unfair parts. Of course, SNAP is a contested program. It's actually the largest line item in the American Farm Bill. Critics raise some real concerns, and some are valid. Others are overstated. Let's try to walk through them fairly, and then push back where we need to. Recent oversight by the Government Accountability Office, also called the GAO, where I spent my first 7 years working out of college, fun fact. The GAO shows that in fiscal year 2023, about 11.7% of SNAP benefit payments were improper, meaning the wrong amount or payments to ineligible households. That corresponds to roughly $10.5 billion of improper payments out of a $90 billion program, not including emergency or disaster allotments, which account for more. Improper payments include overpayments, underpayments, or payments to people who were not eligible. The quality control system is a two-tiered system. States review eligibility and benefit amounts, and the federal agency, through regional offices, independently reviews state data to validate quality control requirements. The system has allowances for tolerance thresholds. Small discrepancies below a certain small dollar threshold are not reported, meaning some small errors may not show up in official numbers. Also, part of improper payments are due to administrative error rather than intentional fraud. Some comes from states failing to verify incomes or failing to update changes. Others from recipients whose circumstances changed or did not report asset or income changes. I can tell you from working in a really big government agency that these kind of changes are definitely difficult to track. Some critics argue able-bodied adults are on SNAP without working. There are work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents, but many states have geographic waivers or good cause exemptions. Those waivers allow many of them to remain eligible even if they are not meeting required work hours. Supporters argue that many households are working, but wages are too low or unstable. Others are caregivers or attending school. Still others are between jobs. Because SNAP allows eligible, purchased food or food product for home consumption, but not hot prepared foods or alcohol or tobacco, there are relatively few restrictions on what participants can buy among eligible foods. Critics say this allows purchase of sugary drinks or ultra-processed foods. But designing national restrictions or product lists is hard to do at scale. It introduces incredible complexity for retailers, for eligibility, for state oversight, and might reduce retailer participation or increase administrative costs. These are all things that we need to think about. Critics have some legitimate concerns. Errors exist, systems are not perfect, and work requirements are relaxed in many places. But many critiques overlook the context. Low wages, instability, caregiving, or costs that push working people into need. And the administrative side is not trivial to fix overnight. A frequent suggestion that I hear is, why don't we make SNAP more like WIC, which is the program for women, infants, and children? Let's explore why that's not necessarily feasible or wise at scale. WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, is targeted to a narrow eligible group: pregnant or postpartum people, infants, and young children under 5, and provides a set package of foods determined by nutrition science, tailored to needs, for example, formula, specific foods or supplements, vouchers, or prescribed packages. Retailers must stock specific items, states must monitor product lists, and participants have limited choices within that package. SNAP, by contrast, serves a much bigger, much broader population, all low-income households who meet eligibility rules. Because of that scale and diversity, the program is built on choice. Participants use their EBT cards at thousands of retailers, including grocery stores, convenience stores, and farmers markets. The idea is flexibility and dignity. If you try to impose the same kind of detailed product restrictions or required packages on millions of households, you run into serious logistical, administrative, and cost challenges. Tracking item-level purchases, checking eligibility at checkout, ensuring retailers stock the right items, enforcing compliance, managing appeals, handling rural or small retailers that may not have scanning or barcode systems that track restricted items. It would likely shrink retailer participation. Some smaller remote stores or farmers might not have capacity to implement or interpret these kinds of restrictions. Could reduce flexibility for participants with varied dietary needs or even food preferences, and increase overhead costs for states to administer and audit product compliance. WIC and SNAP solve different problems. WIC is a prescription nutrition program for a small group. SNAP is grocery money for millions. You can't simply graft WIC complexity onto SNAP without losing scale, speed, or dignity. Let's talk about consequences. What happens when SNAP is cut or halted? Not just for recipients, but for the broader economy, for retailers, for farmers, and for local communities. SNAP is one of those programs that functions as an automatic stabilizer. When households receive benefits, they spend quickly on groceries, which supports retailers and food supply chains. Economic analyses show that in weak economies, each dollar of SNAP benefits can generate more than $1 in economic activity. Some studies estimate that about $1.50 or more in GDP for each dollar of benefits because of the ripple effect in consumption supply chains, wages, and local retail. That means cutting benefits can drag down local economies, especially in low-income or rural communities where the margins are thin and many vendors rely on SNAP redemptions. Let's talk about who else is hit by a SNAP freeze. Retailers. Thousands of grocery stores, convenience stores, small local grocers, and farmers markets rely on SNAP redemption. If benefits shrink or stop, their revenue falls, causing cash flow problems, layoffs, reduced hours for those same people who may also be receiving SNAP benefits and need to log those hours, less inventory turnover. Rural grocery stores are especially vulnerable. Farmers markets and small farms that accept SNAP or participate in programs that allow SNAP dollars at market booths or via token systems, they see lower demand. That affects producers, especially in shoulder seasons or off-peak months. Not just large wholesalers, but small-scale local growers who count on SNAP-driven demand from low-income households. Local economies and tax revenue suffer. Lower retail sales reduces state and local sales tax revenue. Suppliers, transporters, and other parts of the supply chain feel this drop. Charities and nonprofits such as food banks or hunger relief organizations often see spikes in demand when benefits are cut. Some households exhaust their benefits or lose benefits entirely, pushing hunger back onto food banks and pantries. Let's picture a small town on a Saturday morning. A mother comes to the farmer's market with her kids using her EBT card to buy produce. She buys eggs, greens, seasonal vegetables. The local farmer counts those tokens, makes a sale that helps cover the cost of seed, fuel, labor. The market vendor uses that money to pay a teen helper, order more produce. The trucker delivers new crates. The grocer down the street sees fewer customers. Now imagine SNAP cuts. The mother has a smaller grocery budget. She buys less produce. The farmer loses those weekend sales. The teen's hours drop. The trucker delivers less produce to that market or reduces frequency. The grocer sees less foot traffic. All of that ripples outward. Cutting SNAP isn't just reducing grocery budgets. It's lowering the volume of transactions that power our local economies, especially in those low-margin, rural, or underserved areas. I want to tell you something I'm worried about. We're asking people to donate to make up for a frozen SNAP program. Let's be clear, generosity matters. It always seems like the same people who are stepping up time and again, the people who are on thin margins. There are food drives, farmers are donating produce, markets are hosting donation booths. People are saying that they'll give discounts to anyone who shows up with a SNAP card. Farmers are offering furloughed workers food for credit. These are all good things, but generosity cannot replace a good policy. When SNAP is cut or halted, the burden shifts not just to the recipients, but to the people already operating at these small margins, small farmers, farmers markets, rural grocers. Many smaller diversified farms already operate close to the break-even line, sometimes less. Asking them to donate more or to absorb losses is inequitable. Large grocers, big agribusinesses, national chains often have scale, diversification, economies of scale, and larger capital base. They are not typically asked to fill the policy gap. That reveals the power imbalance. Small producers are asked to carry policy failures, while others are not. I actually heard about some bigger chains offering discounts to SNAP users while the program is not operational, and that the USDA stepped in and forbade them to continue such policies. This community generosity ignores a big multiplier. Small producers depend on SNAP spending just like any retailer or vendor. If benefits decline, their revenue declines. Asking them to donate more is asking them to cover their own revenue shortfall. It just doesn't make any sense. Generosity is beautiful, but policy is the scale lever. Don't replace a national stabilizer with a hat pass, especially not from the people who grow the food you buy. So what does better look like? Here are some ideas. Make the administration boringly excellent. States and the federal agencies can invest in better eligibility determination, streamline recertification, and improve data systems, reduce errors. That helps address critics who point to improper payments or error rates without undermining the program's value. Can protect the stabilizer, resist sharp cuts or pauses in benefits, because when households lose benefits, the ripple effect is real on families and on the local food economy. Recovery from those losses is slow and painful for everyone. Let's keep nutrition improvements where they fit best. WIC can continue to refine nutrition packages, and there are incentive programs, for example, produce matches or bonuses at farmers markets that can enhance healthy purchasing without imposing rigid national restrictions on SNAP across all households. We can have the integrity critics want without harming the families or the small producers who depend on those grocery dollars. That is the policy path forward. Thanks for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. If hearing a little bit more about the origin of SNAP and the impact of SNAP cuts on farmers and farmers markets, on small grocers, and more of the players in the food supply chain, I want you to know that the stories and conversations you hear here don't end when the episode does. Through the For Farmers movement, these stories are action in the world. We support small farmers, and bringing eaters like you closer to the people who make your food possible is so important. You can learn more at forfarmersmovement.com. You can also follow along for more facts and red flags on Instagram at XOXOFarmGirl. If this episode sparked something for you, I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review One Bite is Everything on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find the show. One Bite is Everything. It starts on your plate, and it has a really big reach. This is a food podcast, and a politics podcast, and a health, community, and economy podcast, because your food touches quite literally everything. This episode benefits from the sound design and original music by Russell Chapa, who is more than 100 episodes deep with One Bite is Everything. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and I'll see you here again next week for another episode. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.